I know my rose will open. I know my fears will burn away. I know my soul will unfurl its wings. I know my rose will open. I know my rose will open.
A burn at Golden Gardens in Seattle, Washington. Members of the Evergreen Art Therapy Association, or IATA, meet to release old, unwanted pain, fears and losses, disappointments from the past, and create a new vision of the future. This ritual, using fire, is an example of a creative healing process that can be experienced in art therapy. Many people often ask, what is art therapy? What do art therapists do? Can art save lives? Let me introduce to you 5 art therapists.
I had a wonderful experience of going through art therapy myself. It was a dance therapist who also used art therapy combined with it. And that's where I was introduced to it, and I found it fascinating, very gratifying, and thought if I ever could become an art therapist, I might.
I'm Janice Hoshino, and I'm the chair of the art therapy program here at Antioch University, Seattle. I grew up in a very rural, small town in western Pennsylvania, actually on a state hospital grounds. So my childhood consisted of actually running around the state hospital grounds and being very involved in the lives of the patients that were residents there. And it was my father who had said, there's this profession called art therapy.
I started being exposed to art at a very early age. My mother is a poet and my father is a classically trained actor, and my mother's sister is a ceramicist. So I grew up believing that all the adults, that's what adults did, they made art. I also grew up in the photography scene in San Francisco, so I've just been exposed to art pretty much constantly. It was only when I grew up that I realized that most adults were really boring, actually, that they didn't make art.
My name is Meryl Rothis, and I've been an art therapist now for, I graduated in 2001 with my master's in transpersonal counseling psychology and art therapy. So I was in 6th grade. I knew that I wanted to be a psychotherapist, and I used to hold office hours in the girls' bathroom in 6th grade, and I had a nickname called MR Psych, Meryl Rothis Psychiatrist, which is kind of funny. And it wasn't until I was in college when my best friend got into a very, very bad car accident that left her in a coma and left her unable to speak, unable to walk, unable to do anything. Really one of those catapulting experiences that was a real wake-up call for me in the sense of what is life about? What am I doing with my life? And when I would go to visit her in her rehab center, I was watching the work she was doing with an occupational therapist. And I was simultaneously watching a young man who was quadriplegic, who had been a painter. And similar to the artist Chuck Close, was working with his occupational therapist. They had fashioned a headgear around his head. He had no use of his limbs, and he was painting like this. And I watched how people in the creative process were having at least some sort of joy in their life through art. And I had always grown up as an artist. My mom's a painter. Art was always a part of my life. And I thought, gosh, wouldn't that be great if occupational therapy were just a little more art focused. And right around that time somebody said to me, well, have you ever heard of art therapy? And the minute that question was asked, that was it. Sold. I knew. That's what I'm going to do.
Rosalie Frankel, and I've been practicing art therapy since 1980, and I got exposed to art therapy. It was when I was an undergraduate student at UC Santa Cruz. I was studying art and psychology, and I had the great opportunity to meet two art therapists at that time. In the psych fieldwork program, there was a Jungian art therapist that had a program where she would have students go to an elementary school, work with at-risk youth, and then once a week we would gather as a group for supervision and go over the artwork. So it was a wonderful first exposure. And also at the same time, Janie Ryan, who's a Gestalt art therapist, she was doing a sabbatical year in research at my school, and I actually participated in her research project. So it was a great introduction to art therapy. So I've been doing art therapy for 30 years. I've loved it as a field because it's given me so many different options. I've gotten to work with people along the whole spectrum of the life cycle.
Sure, I needed someone to look at it, make sure my eyes are okay. But, you know, and I always think about,
Art therapy students coming in saying, what happened in our room?
How would I define art therapy? I would say that we can take the first part of that word, art, and the second part of that word, therapy, and bring them together, and that creates this hybrid profession, art therapy. I believe it is taking the wisdom of line, shape, color, texture, and teaching a person that line, shape, color, texture are ways to be visually literate, how to use those things, line, shape, color, texture, to speak, to communicate, to express what's in the heart, to express what is beyond words, to teach somebody a new tool for communication. I believe, making art in and of itself, the creative process is healing, is therapy. Teaching somebody how to stretch a canvas, teaching somebody how to gesso a canvas, teaching somebody how to paint increases their self-esteem. That's therapy. As much as art psychotherapy, where there's more of a direct intention on the part of the art therapist working with the client around developing certain interventions, treatment goals to work with that client more in a psychotherapeutic way. So I suppose I see it on the spectrum that there is this art as therapy. Let's be in the studio, make art. Here you are, you're enjoying the love of art making, as well as, okay, here's this intervention, let's give it a shot, and then what can be gleaned after the artwork is created.
What concerns me is the limited opportunities that currently exist and how art therapists have to constantly define what it is and justify what we're doing, and not be taken seriously or respected for the work we do. I see many people who are trained who have to get, like I did in California, had to get a degree in art therapy, but also the MFT licensure, that it's harder to use the artwork. So a lot of times the art therapists become much more conventional art therapists instead of using the art. But I think that the art takes a little more energy, but you get so much more out of using the art that I hope that we can hang on to it and sustain the utilization of it.
Yeah, I think creativity is essential for all art therapists.
It's about being in touch with the collective unconscious about creativity.
My definition of creativity is innovative play with an outcome, and it could be a tangible outcome or a symbolic outcome. Making something from nothing or recombining things into something new.
Art plays a big part of my life. It is behind everything that I do as an art therapist. You know, there's not really a day that goes by that I'm not engaged in the creative process in some way, whether that is that I'm actually making art or making art with somebody else or introducing somebody else to making art or taking snapshots with my eyes around the things that I see and around me. It's everything. I feel like to be an art therapist, my bias is you've got to be an active artist, got to know the creative process, the limitations of it, the challenges, the assets, the possibilities, and you know, it's sort of, for me, eat, breathe, sleep art.